Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel 5 to 9 Real Estate. I'm your host, Rebecca Young. So our channel is all about leveraging your 9 to 5 income and teaching you how to invest in and make money in your 5 to 9. And we just happen to love real estate, so a lot of our channel is about that. So thank you again for tuning in. It's going to be kind of an interesting one tonight because we have in Canada an upcoming election in September, and I think it was a bit of a surprise for a lot of us. On top of that, it seems like a major focus this year is actually going to be around housing, which wasn't as much of a surprise. And I'm glad that the parties are taking note of this, that there's obviously a lot of issues. And I wanted to provide an overview of basically the housing platforms that have been proposed. There's a lot of different information, so to kind of put it kind of consistently, so we're comparing apples and apples when we're looking across the three parties, because I think the most important is that you guys have an unbiased view and transparency, that you can make your own decisions. And regardless, it's important for us to know about this if either you're personal home owners, or if you're looking to get into your first home, if you're looking to get into investments, this is going to affect all of us. So I figured that this was a really important one. From my perspective, and I'm not really going to put in my 2 cents with the exception of this initial statement, I believe that across the country, the reasons why we are seeing this housing crisis is mostly due to housing supply and also issues with our monetary policy, which unfortunately seems to keep flying under the radar. And I'm going to do more videos about this on the channel, but frankly, this really upsets me that it wasn't talked about in our housing platform today, because if we're going to keep stimulating the economy and printing money, that's going to keep resulting in the interest rates being lower and lower. So if the cost of borrowing is so cheap, it's a big part of what's fueling the real estate market. And on the flip side, if it's devaluing the dollar, it's actually increasing the cost of hard assets as well. So this is a big thing. I'm grateful that this is being addressed by the parties, and I do across the board. I like some ideas and I don't like other ideas. And I'm going to do another follow-up video on kind of an opinion piece, because I really just want this to be your full overview, but I just wanted to start with those 2 cents. So with that, I'm going to hop into my computer here. So the first spreadsheet that I wanted to show you guys was that I actually did the research here. I put all of the plans on this spreadsheet so I could look at these in detail and compare them. The reason why I start off with, I really just put them in order of when they were released to the public. So initially it was the NDP, then the Conservatives, and then today, August 24th, the Liberals have put forth their plan. But before then, I just kind of grabbed what they had on their website. I'm going to be producing all of the websites that I leverage for this information below the video as well, in case you guys wanted to go and reference this for yourselves. And as always, I would definitely recommend doing that. Outside of that, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that so far the Green Party and Bloc Québécois have not actually released a new plan as of 2021, August 2021. So the three that we're working with right now are NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals. So I put them into a nicer view, kind of in an overview. So I'm just gonna kind of start from the top. Basically, the NDP probably has, in my opinion, the most comprehensive plan. They're also thinking about types of housing for every possible person out there that could need any kind of housing. They're thinking about the renters as well. So I'm just going to kind of go through the first row here. But for the NDPs, they have plans to cover off rent affordability, issues with the landlord-tenant board, universal design building code, so just making this inclusive for everyone as we're building new buildings moving forward, concentrating on buyer affordability, housing supply issues, government shared equity plans, housing focused around public transit, urban planning updates, issues that they've identified in the Terrian warranty. So when you buy a brand new property, there is an extra warranty that comes alongside that. It's a 7-year program, and what you have covered changes from year to year. I believe it's after the first year, the second year, and then the 7th year. I can put a link up here in case you guys are curious about that. Holding builders accountable, strengthening Ontario's Condominium Act and Condominium Tribunal, incentives for green renovations. I think that this one's actually kind of cool. They are doing this in BC right now. So basically giving people incentives for if you're to make your home more energy efficient, so we can reduce our carbon footprints. And actually, I think they are starting to introduce this in Ontario as well. I think the piece that might be new is changing building codes moving forward, that we are focusing more on keeping buildings green, which is kind of a two birds, one stone. I'm kind of surprised that the Liberals didn't bring this up, because it seems their platform is really focused around the environment. They think that that's what people care the most about for this upcoming election. So I was a little surprised that they didn't bring that up. Also, revisiting the non-resident speculation tax, tackling speculation and vacancy, foreign investment, property taxes, short-term rentals, flipping, money laundering, Indigenous housing, homelessness, shelters for vulnerable populations, housing challenges specific to Northern Ontario. And you know what? The other thing I'm going to really give the NDP credit for was that they actually made it really clear about what their investment plan was, where they were planning to get this money. To be honest, I was a little concerned about the numbers and the math in that, but at least, there was a lot of transparency there in terms of there's something in terms of how they're going to pay for all this. So I really appreciated that, and I think they get an extra 10 points there. Then moving down to the Conservatives, their plan was kind of shorter and sweeter, let's say, but these were the issues that they have kind of come up with ideas for. So buyer affordability, housing supply, housing focused around public transit, urban planning updates. This was also kind of a unique idea, but releasing government property. So basically, I guess it makes sense. The federal government is the biggest landowner in Canada. They have 37,000 buildings, and basically their idea is that they can release at least 15% of these buildings to go into conversions into affordable housing. So I thought that was kind of a neat idea and kind of thinking outside the box. Being able to defer capital gains for investments, specifically incentives for land donations, 7 to 10 year mortgage terms. I'm not going to go into detail about all of these, but this was kind of an interesting idea as well. So for those of you who haven't had a mortgage yet, basically there's a few different numbers you have to keep track of, but I find that there's often a mix up between mortgage terms and amortization. So amortization is basically if you were to hold the loan for the entire amortization, how long it would take for you to pay that loan off. And then the mortgage term is typically done in terms of, I find the most common is 3 to 5 years. And so the thinking behind this was that if they provided 7 to 10 years, which some banks actually do offer that, but I guess like trying to create a new market around this was the idea. So it provides some more stability, because the idea is that if there is fluctuation in an interest rate, then you know that you're good, that you kind of have your set cost in terms of your mortgage cost for 7 to 10 years. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Changes to the stress test. So the idea here was that if you are renewing a mortgage and you're going with the same lender, then you don't have to do a stress test. But if you're going to others, then you do have to do a stress test. And so the idea was that they want to incentivize more competition in the market. So they wanted to actually scrap the idea of having to refinance with a stress test, so that you didn't automatically go with your own personal lender, the one that you had before. I personally think if you wanted to open it up, and also I think the stress test there is there for a reason to protect everybody. So I think if we could, kind of put that across the board, regardless of what you were doing, then I think that would maybe be another idea to consider, a slightly better idea. But that was something that they came up with as well. And they suggested changing mortgage default insurance eligibility. The Conservatives also want to tackle speculation and vacancy. They also want to tackle foreign investment and money laundering, Indigenous housing again. And that's it for the Conservatives. And then the Liberals just released their platform today. And the challenges that they want to tackle are around buyer affordability again, housing supply, government shared equity plans, first-time buyer tax credits, revisiting real estate transactions, just basically the full overview of them, making sure there's more transparency. They're trying to avoid more of these bidding wars, stuff like that. They want to tackle blind bidding. They want to introduce a free savings plan. And I actually thought that this one was a good idea in terms of kind of like it's like a TFSA, but being able to draw from it like an RSP. Where basically you can put up to $40,000 in there, and this is for anybody up to 40 years old, and that basically when it comes time to buying a property, you can draw from it. and that'll be tax-free. So, and it's unclear to me in terms of how this is going to work with the current first-time buyers incentive that you can dip into from your RSP. I don't know if you can do them both together or what the plan is there, but I'm sure that's something that will come up in debates as well, just so they can dig into this a little bit more. But I thought that that was a good idea. That was one I liked. Urban planning updates, mortgage default, insurance eligibility again. They also want to tackle speculation and vacancy, foreign investment, new residential property rebates, flipping, money laundering, Indigenous housing again, and shelters for vulnerable populations. And that was it for the Liberals. So the reason why I created this view along the top is that, you know, there are a lot of ideas here and there's a lot that we can tackle. But I think this kind of highlights the main issues that they're hearing from their research and in the field. So I thought I would kind of dig into these a little bit more in terms of what each party's position and what their ideas are for tackling these specific issues. So if I look at this, obviously buyer affordability, housing supply are big issues for people. So the parties, all three of them have plans for that. They all have ideas around urban planning and speculation, vacancy, foreign investment, money laundering, and about Indigenous housing as well. So what I did was, if I just kind of scroll over here, I broke it all down for us. So we had that really ugly sheet on the previous page, and I put it here in a little bit of a nicer view. By the way, I'm going to be making this Excel spreadsheet available for everybody. So if you guys are interested in that, you can just hop over to our Instagram channel, which is at 5to9.ca, and I'll put a link there so that you can put it like a Google Sheets or something there that you can access this. For the record, I mean, I'm doing this pretty quickly because I thought it was top of mind in the market and I wanted to get it out to everybody. And I tried to do as much homework as I could here to make sure that I was giving relevant information and the best, most up-to-date information. If anybody has any comments about what I've collected, or if I've missed anything, or if there's anything that you're kind of curious about, you want to dig into further, more than open to leaving comments down below. I'll be happy to respond. If it kind of sparks an idea for another video, I'm happy to do that as well. So for the first one that we're going to tackle, the buyer affordability. So if we start off with NDP's plan, basically their ideas were as follows. So they're going to help first-time buyers with the down payment and kind of like a shared equity plan. And they also want to grant municipalities the power to kind of set their own property taxes. And I thought this was kind of interesting because basically what they're suggesting is that those that have lower valued homes, we can shift property taxes away from them and actually distribute more towards those that have properties that are worth more than $2 million. And for the Conservatives, again, like I mentioned before, they talked about the new market basically for the 7 to 10 year mortgages and changes to the stress test. And I also thought this was a good idea, but they also want to change the limit on eligibility for mortgage default insurance. So did another video on that, and I can reference that link if you guys are curious. But basically, as it stands right now, if you're going over $1 million, you automatically don't qualify for CMHC or mortgage default insurance. And you know, CMHC is kind of like the most well-known company that offers that. But again, I'll leave the video in case you want to dive into that more. So the point being is that if you're in Toronto, for example, you're anything in a freehold, you're looking at over $1 million. And a lot of condos are honestly starting to get kind of close to that too. So basically what they're saying is that this needs to keep up with the rate of inflation in our home prices, right? That this should probably be available for people that are purchasing homes over $1 million as well, which frankly I agree with. And then also I thought this was interesting that they want to make changes to the stress test because they feel like it discriminates against small business owners, contractors, and other non-permanent employees, including casual workers. And I think that's definitely, you know, something that should be looked into regardless. And I hope, regardless of who wins, I hope that the other party looks into that as well. Then for the Liberals, like I mentioned before, they're going to be introducing this first home savings account. And this was also news to me. So they're talking about doubling the first-time buyer's tax credit from $5,000 to $10,000. I actually had to Google that. I didn't know that we had a first-time buyer's tax credit. So I'm going to be messaging my clients, obviously from this year and then previous years as well, because, you know, speak to your accountants, but you should be able to go back there and apply for this tax credit. Hey, if you can get a little bit of money back on your taxes, why not, right? I don't really feel like this is super well advertised, so I'm glad that I caught this here. And then their second last idea was to slash the CMHC, the mortgage default insurance again. They want to slash those mortgage insurance rates by 25%. So in their calculations, that should be savings of about $6,000. And so it's important to note here that it's not really savings per se, and it's not really a rebate. It's basically when you buy the home, the mortgage default insurance is actually applied to your down payment essentially. So it eats up your down payment. So I don't know, just for the sake of some numbers, let's say you put $20,000 into the property to purchase it, and those rates. I actually did a video on the mortgage default insurance, so make sure I have the link here. But let's say the insurance eats up like 15 grand of that because of the premiums applied to it. That's applied to your mortgage. So from day one, even though you put in that $20,000 down payment, that means that your equity has already been decreased to 5. So basically what they're saying here is that instead of it being 15, it'll be $9,000 applied to that. So basically this is where I don't really think that helps people per se, because it helps you down the line if you're selling the property or if you're refinancing the property and taking the money back out, but that's not accessible to you. So it's a nice to have, don't get me wrong, but it's not, I don't think that's really going to help with buyer affordability. Then they're also recommending a rent to own program, which I also thought was kind of interesting, but I'm going to save that for another video. So the next topic is around housing supply. So NDP's proposal is basically going to be that they want to build an additional 69,000 new affordable housing units in Northern Ontario specifically, and they want to extend the lifespan of 260,000 affordable homes. They also want to deliver 30,000 new homes with supports, and so what they mean by that is for like units basically, or homes where people will be or are battling mental health challenges or addiction, so that they have specific housing to support their needs. The Conservatives' idea here is that they want to increase supply by 1 million homes in the next 3 years. And like I mentioned before, they want to release 15% of their government buildings for potential housing as well. And they also want to provide an incentive for corporations and private landowners to donate their property to affordable housing. So similar to what already exists for if people want to donate land for ecological reserves. Then the Liberals have proposed that they want to build, preserve, and repair 1.4 million homes in the next 4 years. And I felt that they didn't really go into detail about this. It was really just that they're going to provide cities with new tools to speed up housing construction, which also kind of concerns me a bit, because what do we mean by speed up housing construction? If we're able to, kind of cut through some red tape to get it going, great, but don't really want to incentivize people to build homes more quickly than we should, because then they might not be safe for people. So I kind of just, think about that maybe a little bit more. And that they also want to create a $4 billion pool of cash that incentivizes cities to help create middle-class homes. And they also want to crack down on speculators owning vacant land. I also thought that this was kind of interesting, because I think in the areas where the people really want to live, there isn't really a lot of vacant land. And I think that's a big part of the problem. If you're getting into more rural communities, it poses a whole bunch of other challenges, because, if you're cutting down a bunch of trees, for example, you have to put out water lines, hydro lines, like there's so many other challenges there. And that's why a lot of these rural communities haven't been actually built out yet. So there's a few different challenges in that. And I don't really think it's fair to say that people are speculators owning land. A lot of people are still farmers, are actually leveraging that land. And if all around them in the communities, people own acres of land, like it's not like they're trying to be greedy and holding on to it so it increases in value to cut other people out. I think we drive through cities, we're not really seeing a lot of land, and now we have to get creative by tearing down other buildings to be able to build new ones. So I wasn't really sure about that point, but I'm glad that they're thinking about this stuff. Then moving on to the next one, I thought across the board these were all good ideas, for urban planning updates. So with the NDP, they're suggesting that they want to encourage more basement apartments, laneway housing, granny flats, basically want to update land use planning rules. I think that this is all great stuff, because ultimately, like I said, from my perspective, and I think the majority of investors that you'll talk to, and probably a lot of people that are out there trying to find places to rent or even buy, will all agree that there's a huge housing supply issue. So if we can optimize the properties that we do have, I think that that is a very quick and easy way, and also the scalability, right? Because then we're not relying on tax dollars to be able to do this stuff. You have independent homeowners, you have independent landlords, small-time landlords that are looking to optimize their properties and potentially house hack, right? So kind of two birds, one stone, and win-win for everybody. I think that those kinds of ideas are great, and that's low-hanging fruit. And their other idea was to basically align growth with transit investments and while ensuring environmental protections, which I think is great as well, because they're talking about the green belt, right? Making sure that's protected and not dipping into that land. I think it's an important balance. So, and honestly, this is actually pretty similar across the board. The Conservatives also want to build public transit infrastructure, connecting homes and jobs, basically. And they also want to require municipalities that are receiving federal funding to keep increasing the number of homes around public transit, basically, so that, just new cities and developing cities are going to be a little bit better planned out than Toronto has been, where we're kind of trying to put public transit into a city that's already been built. And then the Liberals have promised $2.7 billion over 4 years to build or repair more affordable homes, and they've suggested converting empty office space into housing. And they've also suggested multi-generational home renovation tax credit. So this, for me, this is similar, where they're suggesting, if you're going to be putting in basement apartments or laneway houses, that kind of idea. So this is also kind of interesting because it's to offset the cost of adding a secondary unit to the home. I'm just curious what this means in terms of, I'm assuming that obviously if you're renting to family, but you're not actually renting, then maybe this is where that's trying to come in and address that. I'm curious if that's something that you can build on top of, if you're duplexing a property, for example. Just kind of curious in how that works from the investment side and what they intend for multi-generations. So the next one is tackling speculation and vacancy. So for the NDP, they want to introduce a speculation and vacancy tax on residential property. It's proposed to be 2% of assessed value over 2 years. I personally don't have a problem with this. I'm just a little bit curious about how they're exactly going to track that, but I do think it's a good idea. They also want to track and tax pre-construction condo flipping, which is really interesting, because what they were saying is that basically that process isn't properly documented. So a lot of people will basically speculate on the market in the pre-construction phase, which, to be honest, I haven't seen really, I think, ever. Certainly not with my clients. And there's a lot of paperwork involved with being a realtor. So I was a bit surprised by that. I think that that's something I need to dig into more myself to better understand. But yeah, absolutely. If that's a loophole and they want to close it, great. And then for the Conservatives, they want to arrest and reverse inflationary impacts of foreign buyers and speculation in the housing market. And they didn't really dig into this, but they know it's important and that's in their plan. And then for the Liberals, they've proposed a new federal home buyers bill of rights that will basically ban blind offers. It's not exactly tackling speculation and vacancy. I feel like it kind of fits into this topic, so I did kind of put these into the same column, but basically their main ideas are to ban blind offers. So there's price transparency, so that would-be buyers know the history of the recent house sale prices, and that there's just more disclosures there, and that people will always have the right for a home inspection. Technically, you do always have the right for a home inspection. If you find yourself in multiple offer situations, you can bring a home inspector and do a quick home inspection before you place an offer. Or in a lot of cases, they will also, especially depending on the type of property you're buying, they will also supply a home inspection report, just so you have the ability to look through that. If there are any material defects in the property, they actually legally have to disclose that to you. They can't just, sell you a lemon knowingly. So there's a couple of things that to me show that this government needs to kind of dig into this industry a little bit more and understand how this works and the specific issues. I also just, from the economics point of view, I worry a bit about price transparency, because I know that there have been cases where I've offered and we're only like a few $1,000s away from each other. And so if both parties know that, obviously you can't go into that, and it's not like people are calling and saying, hey, you're only a couple thousand away, like, do you want to up it? Like, that's actually illegal. They're not supposed to be doing that. But I mean, like, after the fact, if like an agent has told me what the price is sold for, or if we see what the property is sold for once it's been posted and we know what we offered, like, we know we were close. But in that case, I would know that my buyers were at their top limit, or we did our research on the market to know what the property was actually worth, and we were only comfortable with that amount. But if you know that there's a difference of $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, and you're talking about properties that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not like millions of dollars, it's kind of a tricky thing, right? You're gonna compete, and that's still gonna happen. So it's a tough problem regardless. I just don't know if the price transparency is actually going to give us the results that we're looking for. I think that there's better ideas overall across these platforms that would address some of these issues, and I'm not sure about this one. I hope that they do a little bit more research first before really trying to implement that. And then they also want to temporarily ban flipping homes. That's also a big one. Right now, for a lot of investors, unless flipping is like your income, so you would literally be destroying some people's complete businesses and livelihood. That's already a problem. And then on top of that, a lot of people don't actually want to flip homes because you actually realize a bunch of losses. I've talked about in other videos on this channel, like a BRRRR structure, where if you refinance the property instead, you're still able to get your equity back out, but you're not dinged for capital gains yet because you haven't actually disposed of the property. So I think, unfortunately, that's actually going to just encourage people to buy and hold, or to do BRRRRs, and that's also going to hurt the supply on the market, right? And a lot of the investors that I know that are in my circle, and for us included, we all buy on cash flow, and so we need as many units as we can get legally into properties, basically optimize them for best and highest use. And even for ourselves, we live in a duplex, right? Like we live by the same way that we supply housing for other people. And the point that I'm trying to make is that we really focus on the supply issue piece of it and supplying more housing to the market. Yeah, so the problem is that if people are just keeping homes, it's not going to be brought back onto the market. So we're still supplying homes from this perspective of renters that, frankly, either don't want to or can't go out and buy properties themselves. But it's going to be taking potential homes away from, like, depending on the market, it's going to be taking potential homes away from buyers, because you're going to tighten up supply here. Then moving on to the next one for the foreign investment. For the NDPs, they are suggesting that they want to increase the non-resident speculation tax from 15% to 20%, and they want to expand that tax to apply everywhere in Ontario. I don't disagree with this, but I have a lot of friends that are new Canadians that are working on their PR status, and it puts them between a rock and a hard place, because they can't afford the areas that they want to buy into, because it's already such a large requirement for the capital to get into the market, and then there's an extra 15% on top of that. So if we increase that further and then remove their ability to get into anywhere in Ontario, like, that's really unfortunate. I think that I get what they're trying to do for the families that have all the money, can buy places in cash, that are really heating up the market. I get it, but I don't think that that's the majority of people. So I would just like to see a little bit more thought put into this to really qualify that you're applying the tax to the right people, because I'd hate to see us pushing out new Canadians that are going to get there and get into the market, but then now we're forcing them to wait even longer to get all their necessary paperwork, when the market's going to be a lot more expensive when they can finally buy in. So in terms of the others, basically the Conservatives want to ban foreign investors not living in or moving to Canada from buying homes here within a 2-year period, and then it'll be reviewed. So instead, they want to encourage foreign investment into purpose-built rental housing that is affordable to Canadians. The first piece of this, I don't know, again, like, how are you going to track all this stuff? I think that developing that system in itself is going to be tricky and also expensive. So, kind of need to weigh that out. But I do like the idea of, instead of closing up shop and saying no more, I do like the idea of, like, hey, we're just going to incentivize you into investing in affordable housing for Canadians. I think that that's actually a good idea to push that more onto other parties to get help from that, because that creates a win-win situation, as opposed to if we're looking to build out all this affordable housing ourselves as Canadians, we all know that that's got to come from somewhere, right? So we're going to have to pay more in taxes for that. So I think that this is actually the second part of the idea is a great idea, and the first one might be a little bit tricky to track. But in terms of the Liberals, they have also stated that they want to temporarily block foreign nationals from buying homes for 2 years, and they want to take new regulatory measures to police exploitative real estate agents. So I don't know if that's specific to do with foreign nationals or if that's just how he feels about the professional overall. That's okay. So money laundering, the second last one. I thought this was really interesting as well. And I think this is also worth digging into more. So the NDPs are saying that they want to end hidden ownership of real estate, and that basically money laundering is a big issue in Canada, that there's currently an estimated $130 billion that comes into Canada illegally each year. And I have seen documentaries on this as well. I didn't realize it was quite that high. That seems insane. So yeah, if that's the case, obviously that sucks when the rest of us are paying our fair share for taxes and contributing to the country, and everything's on paper and on the up and up. If we can find a way to dip into that and get that to stop happening, or at the very least figure out how to tax that money, then I'm all for that. And so the Conservatives kind of had a similar idea. So basically they want to implement comprehensive changes to current acts and services. So they were talking about the Proceeds of Crime, in brackets, Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act, and give FinTrack, and actually FinTrack, just as a quick tangent, so as realtors, whenever we receive funds, so if we're getting a deposit to put into a real estate transaction, we do have to fill out FinTrack forms. So we have to fill out forms that verify the identity of the purchaser and also give information on their bank account, like which bank it's from, how much money, if it's over a certain amount of money, if there's anything that you kind of have to fill out the form, and if there's anything suspicious about it, it does go to FinTrack and it has to be investigated. So there's already a system in place for that. And I'm a very compliant person. I do things legally. I care a lot about being a good person and abiding by the rules and the laws set out by society. So I haven't seen any issues with this. But yeah, I think if they think it needs to be beefed up, great. I'm all for that as well, because I play by the rules. My clients play by the rules, and for it to be fair for everybody, I think that they should investigate that more. If they need to beef it up and put some teeth in it, then great, let's do that. They also want to give law enforcement prosecutors the tools necessary to identify, halt, and prosecute money laundering in Canada, and specifically in the real estate markets. They also want to closely examine the findings and recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry into Money Laundering in BC. So I actually wasn't familiar with this. It's the Council to Fully and Impartially Investigate Issues of National Importance. And I put a little link down there as well in case you guys would also like to see that. And they also want to establish a federal beneficial ownership registry for residential property, which I think is an interesting idea. I think it's a good idea. There are a lot of people that do joint venture agreements and stuff, and that other people have beneficial interests in the property. So I think for the sake of full transparency, that's a good idea. And I think this is also partially because of the money laundering, that they want to make sure that they know where money is coming from into Canada. Again, I think if you're dealing with people that are trying to skirt around the law, I don't know how you're going to track that, right? I think people like that are always going to find ways to get around that, and we're going to be constantly chasing them like a game of cat and mouse. But again, I'm glad that, we're having these conversations and starting to brainstorm. And, and frankly, I kind of wish that instead of choosing parties, we could just pick ideas that we liked and then just vote on it to say, regardless of the party, this is, as a country, this is what we want to do moving forward. Because I like some of these ideas and I don't like others. And I wish I could kind of mix and mash in terms of what I would actually want to implement. So that's my little tangent for today. And I do apologize, because I really meant to not actually interject any of my opinions in this, but I've kind of done that, so I apologize. Like I said, I'm not a perfect person. I don't know everything. I try to research to form my opinions. I talk to other people. I'm always open to be challenged. If anybody thinks that I'm totally out to lunch with anything that I've said, or if there's something that you think I could think about differently, honestly, leave a comment down below. More than happy to have that conversation with you, or if you have ideas, other things that you want me to dip into more and create another video on, I'm happy to do that as well. Going back to this, because we're nearly done. For the money laundering piece of it, the Liberals, they haven't really released anything specific to money laundering that I've seen so far. I felt like these ideas kind of touched on it a little bit. So they're also suggesting an anti-flipping tax on residential properties, and they want to undertake a review of escalating home prices in high-price markets like Toronto and Vancouver to determine if speculation is driving up the cost of housing. That last piece was actually in their old housing platform that was on their website. I haven't seen that on the new plan that was released today. I think just because of what people in the market are saying and how people are responding to the Conservative and the NDP plan, I think they've identified that yes, speculation is probably an issue that needs to be resolved in Canada and doesn't need an investigation first. And then the last piece about the Indigenous housing, basically all very similar. So NDP is proposing an Indigenous-led strategy where NDP government would support construction of at least 22,000 additional units. And the Conservatives are taking the position that they want to partner with Indigenous communities and empower Indigenous peoples with the autonomy to meet their own housing needs. And then the Liberals are saying that they would like to provide more money for Indigenous housing to help those living in substandard conditions. That was a very big overview, and I apologize. I hope that kind of helps clear it up and give you a different view of everything that's been proposed and kind of the differences between the parties. Like I said, I put in this little column here. For me personally, I really wish that somebody would tackle this monetary policy issue. I don't think it's enough just to say that the central bank has it. I think we need to start admitting the fact that that's also having a big impact on our market. So, and I recognize that, there are deflationary pressures as well as inflationary pressures in various parts of our market. And I appreciate that it's a huge job for central bankers. This is why I didn't stick with economics and finance. Thank God for you guys. This is your realm. I feel for you. But something needs to be done about that with the housing market, because I think we're facing a position now with the housing market where we need to raise rates, and I don't see how we can do it. So, that's a problem. And I think it's a really big one. It's the reason why the politicians don't want to tackle it. But I think something's got to give, and somebody's kind of come up with some ideas, or at least address it. It's a problem that needs to be tackled. The other thing is that they hadn't really talked about capital gains this time around. I know the NDP last time was suggesting that. So currently when you're selling anything outside of a primary residence and investment properties, you are only charged on 50% of your gain for capital gains. And then you are also able to deduct your expenses for the cost of acquiring the property and for the cost of disposing of the property. And so basically, Jake Mead's idea back a couple of years ago for the last election was that they were going to increase the capital gains from 50% up to 75% that they could tax the gain on. And I haven't seen anything about that from the party this year. The Conservatives have said that they will never tax personal, primary residences, and the Liberal government didn't release anything on that for this update of their new housing plan. This might be an unpopular opinion and probably not what somebody would expect a real estate investor to say, but I actually don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world for us to have capital gains on a primary residence as well. And before everyone starts freaking out and attacking me on the keyboard, I have a couple of reasons for this. And ultimately, I think it does need to be over a certain value threshold. But also, me as an investor, it's one property that I get to save capital gains on. Honestly, yes, I always want to save and optimize my tax strategy legally and, as much as possible, but one property, isn't going to make or break anything. And frankly, I don't see how else we will start to make a dent in the debt that we have. And the other problem is that we can't really tax income anymore, because if you look at, there's so many charts out there, and I'll grab one to show on the video here, but hard assets have been increasing at an exponential rate, and income levels have been relatively flat compared to that. So the problem is that we're already feeling such a pinch because of inflation and because of additional housing costs. There isn't really any more juice to squeeze out of the income tax. But there's huge gains in real estate because of a lot of the monetary policy issues. But regardless, there's huge gains there. And we also have an aging population where the majority of this money is being held in the boomer generation wealth of their homes. And everyone's talking about this great wealth transfer. If that's happening in the future, I'd honestly be kind of surprised if any party doesn't tap into that opportunity, because that's probably where we're all going to feel it the least. And I think that's going to do the most amount of good to actually, put money into a ton of areas that need it right now. And ultimately, taxes are supposed to be for good, right? So I was just kind of surprised that I think, again, this is something that, is a big tricky issue, and a lot of people are probably just trying to avoid it. But I think it's actually something that's worth exploring. And I'd be really curious to see if we actually saw a detailed plan of the amount of money that this could, create, and what we're actually going to do with it and the benefit of that, I think the majority of the population would be okay with that, right? So I'd really love to see, for the other parties, I'd really love to see their financial breakdown of where they're getting the funds to do these various things that they want to do in their plans, and, the exact cost to Canadians, or where they're going to come up with those funds. So that's kind of my overview. I apologize again because that was a really long one, but I think it's very, very important right now. I promise that I'll do an update video if there are new releases from the Green Party or the Bloc Québécois on kind of their ideas for housing. And again, if anybody has any other follow-up questions to this, or if you would like, I was kind of thinking about doing a panel where we could bring in a couple different real estate investors or even people from different backgrounds to kind of share their thoughts on the feasibility of these plans, the cost of these plans, if they think it's actually going to have the desired impact on the market. I think that might be kind of cool. So if you guys also think that that'd be a neat idea, I would appreciate that in the comments below, or a thumbs up on the video. If you like this kind of content, and if you want the more timely content on what's going on with our housing market right now, and kind of immediate thoughts on it from an experienced real estate investor and also millennial, I'd be happy if you guys can subscribe to the channel, and then it lets me know that I'm fighting the good fight and that I'm giving you guys good information. So with that, guys, as always, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.